Hey, peace and love to everybody that's out here. This is a new year, 20 for 20, and we're going to deal with this with some nice scholarship. We're not going to agree or with everything everyone says, but it's a learning experience. And just remember, for 20 for 20, Brother Garfield is the interviewer. For this specific interview, Remy and the brother Medicine Shell, which I did months ago, um, is two different perspectives from the Hebraic Igbo perspective. One is for it and one is totally against it. So what I did is in the comments, in the about section for this video, there's two links. One for the NSUKKA fine that goes back to 2000 or 2500 BC, and the other is about the oral tradition over 13 different traditions. So I wanted everybody, while you watch this interview, just bear in mind that you have the information to go to. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me know how the sound is, and we are ready to go. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Garfield from the Brother Garfield podcast. Today I have a special guest, Remy. I mispronounce his name. He will correct me. And for those who are not familiar with Remy, he's a PhD candidate, a researcher, historian, scholar of religion. He's presently at the UC Riverside, California. Previously, at the present time, chairman and secretary general of Ominana Defenders and a staunch activist religious court's ruling that Igbos are lineal descendants of the Israelites. In addition to Yona's public engagements and incisive discussions of religious court's ruling, he's also a very prolific essayist and writer, having authored and published 20 books, among which are Igbo Religion and Culture, Hebrew Igbo Republics, Culture, Religion, and DNA, Igbos and Abraham's DNA, and African American history from Israel through Africa to the Americas, and the Igbos in Israel, an intercultural study of the oldest and largest Jewish diasporas. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you. It's an honor to bring to you Remy. How are you doing today, my brother?
Fine, my brother. I'm doing fine.
All right. One of the books that I just observed that I was just reading about is one with the connection of the Igbos of African Americans. I think is that your latest book, the one about African Americans?
No, I produced it in 2019, and it bears the title African Americans because I had to compress the title. It's essentially the journey of many African Americans and many Caribbeans from the land of Israel through West Africa to the New World.
Okay.
If I had space on the title, it would have also captured the centrality of the Caribbean discussion, Israelite discussion on the cover. So it's about African Americans and also Caribbean Israelites and Igbo journey.
Mm-hmm. A lot of folks in the African American community are skeptical about the whole argument. Some are for it, some are against it. And today I'm trying to have a balanced conversation where you're like a first-hand guy who has been the major guy at the forefront of pushing the Igbos and a connection with African Americans and Igbos connection to the Hebrews of the past and so forth. I want to first and foremost commend you for your being basically the trailblazer for years, like I called you out in the questions. So as a trailblazer for years for the Igbo Jewish Hebrew connection, how did you get started on this particular journey? What kind of set you off in that direction?
Thank you. This is what I decided to make my life's work is my lived experience. It's something we are living every day. We live as Israelites. The culture we practice is Israelite culture. Everything about how we live is Israelite. Our origins, our origin stories are Israelite. Our laws and traditions are Israelite. Our games are Israelite. But when I got to a certain stage in life, I discovered that because of our colonial experience, which essentially took away our power to tell our stories ourselves, and this elephant in the room that I keep on calling out, racism and anti-Semitism, which we are victims of. This story was being suppressed, denied, obfuscated. So 20 years ago, I took a leave from my legal practice and began to document our traditions, so that our people who live this tradition of Israel every day, we really understand that it is Israelite traditions they are practicing when they do things they do every day. I will give you an example. When COVID came up in the world and everybody began to talk about washing hands, why do we need to talk about, why do we need to advise people to wash hands if everybody in the world was washing hands before they ate? We had to tell people to wash hands because it is not religion and culture for most people in the world to wash their hands before they eat. But the first thing an Igbo man does or an Igbo woman does in the morning is to wash the hands. And before an Igbo man eats even bananas, an Igbo man must wash the hands. And before the Igbo man eats, even in the Western countries where people eat with knife and fork, compulsively he has to wash the hands. And this is Israelite traditions. But the average Igbo thinks that everybody in the world does that. So it became necessary to begin to write these things down so that the Igbos will understand what they are doing. Because if you are practicing a tradition without knowing its history and culture, without knowing its history, over time you will become lackadaisical. You will become lax and you will lose the tradition. Like another example, the Igbos possess the world's largest business incubator platform. World's largest business incubator platform. In other words, the Igbos are the #1 startup nation in the world. Nation, I don't mean state. The state of Israel has also been described as a startup nation, but I think it will come first if we are talking about groups that have managed to become states. But if you are talking about nations that may not be states, Igbos start more businesses than every other group in the world. It was an American that went to Nigeria, did the research, and came up with the findings that Igbos build the largest business incubator platform in the world. How many Igbos living today know that what they do is rooted and centered in the Hebrew Bible? Only very few, but they do it every day. I will tell you what we do. The Hebrew Bible says, when your brother a Hebrew becomes poor, he shall come and live with you. On the 7th year, you shall set him free. But you shall also give him provisions as he's living. This is what is behind the Igbo business success. This is what the Igbos use to produce that largest business incubator platform. But Igbos did not know that it was their tradition which the writers of the Hebrew Bible wrote down. So, because this tradition, the history of this tradition is not well known to the present generation, it is not being respected as it should be. These are some of the reasons that impelled me over 20 years ago to begin to do what I'm doing, to write down these traditions and to call the Igbos back, to call their descendants in the Caribbeans and in the African American world back. Some are in Gabon, some are in Sierra Leone, to begin to tell them, go back to your traditions. Your traditions are the traditions that the authors of the Hebrew Bible cited. Thank you.
Okay. To follow up to that, are you, well, you know what? Let me go in the same order. Is the claim a bloodline claim, or is it partially a conversion claim for the Igbos?
The jury has returned its results. I'm referring to the jury now because I cannot be a judge in my own cause. In this case, we know who we are. Our traditions scream we are Israelites. Our name screams we are Israelite. Igbo is simply the word Hebrew. But a jury constituted not by Igbos have taken a look at the entire matter and they passed their judgment. Daniel Lees, Swiss-Israeli anthropologist and Ashkenazi Jew, conducted one of the most compelling modern histories of the Igbos, and he was definitive that the traditions of the Igbos are definitely Israelite. And then Obadiah Alliance, a Sephardic Jewish Bedin, constituted a Sephardic Jewish Bedin headed by a rabbi who has a PhD, well respected in Jewish circles. They embedded themselves in the Igbo community, observed the Igbos one-on-one, and after they gathered all the information available, studied them, and in February 2022, they ruled that Igbos are lineal descendants of the biblical Israelites. And the last point, another jury has also come out with the result. All the Igbos that have gone for DNA analysis, I believe I will find something to support this. All the Igbos that have gone for DNA analysis, the result that comes out is that their DNA extends the DNA, the DNA that matches their own are serially those found in what we call the Middle East. Like my own, the largest map shown, the largest of the three maps that My Heritage Incorporated shows is the one that started all the way from Mesopotamia, Iraq, Israel, Egypt. Is larger than the dots that shows Nigeria. But I also understand why it presented Nigeria having a large percentage. What it is saying is that a very huge number of the biblical Israelites are in present day Nigeria as the Igbo people. And that makes a lot of sense. Because when you look at the Igbo population, those that still identify as Igbos are 50 million. I do not know the numbers we will attach to those that identify as African Americans and Caribbeans and the other countries I mentioned now. But if you are to bring all of them together, you are talking about 100 million people. So, where does conversion come in? To tell the Igbos to in any way think that Igbos will legitimately convert to any religion, especially if it's an Israelite religion, is to think that people like Joshua, Samuel, Moses could convert to an Israelite religion. Somebody doesn't convert to what he is already. Thank you.
All right. All right. Are you claiming also that all Igbos or Jews are just specific groups in specific regions are connected to the original Hebrews?
All Igbos are Israelites. Our identity is Hebrew or Israelite. The identity Jew belongs to members of the house of Israel that are related to us. But it's not our identity. So to answer the question again, all Igbos, I have spent enough time on this subject that people don't doubt that I've engaged in it more than anybody alive today. I have surveyed and surveyed the Igbo landscape. Every Igbo in the world is an Israelite or a Hebrew.
Okay. All right. What role does oral tradition play, seeing so many different traditions exist in Igbo land? And how do you determine which ones are correct? Because you do have a lot of oral traditions. There's over 13 that I actually recall. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we say, hey, this one is correct, that one is not correct? How do we deal with these traditions of origins that exist all over Igbo land?
People that we could rightly call real Igbos identify with only one tradition of origin. I've been in this subject long enough to know that the only tradition of origin that is traditional to Igbos is that we came from Israel. But with the advent of Facebook, which enables everybody to publish Wikipedia, and with people becoming subject to influences that are not traditional to Igbos, I believe that some people who may be Igbos may also be imagining things that are not traditional to us. But the only tradition of origin that I know about is that we are Hebrews. And this is the only tradition of origin that matches our way of life. Because one's tradition of origin is supposed to match one's way of life. If somebody makes a claim that they have been English people for 500 years, and we do not see traces of Christianity, Anglican or Catholic, in the way of life of such a person who became English 500 years ago, we would know that the person is engaged in what Igbo scholar Jambene, that is cock and bull stories. The only tradition of origin which matches Igbo culture and religion, Omenana. Igbos don't have two religions and cultures, they have only one. It is called Omenana. And the Omenana was what Moses and God called the way of life of Israel. The language that Moses used at Mount Sinai, in whatever language he had God speak to him, what he told the Israelites is that your way of life is Omenana. So if an Igbo is saying he came from England, he should show us traces of English culture in the Igbo religion and culture. If he's saying that the Igbos came from China, we want to see Chinese culture in Igbo culture. But Igbos have maintained we are Israelites, and the Israelites or Hebrew term for religion and culture is the Igbo term for religion and culture. So we can dismiss whatever other tradition of origins that exists. We can describe them as what they are, fit for the dustbin.
I'm sure a lot of people disagree watching, but let me ask this as a follow-up question. This is from a brother who's a part of my group. He always asks this question: when do we see the first reference of Israel in the Igbo land? When do we have a recordation of this? Anybody saying that they're a part of Israel?
Certainly, nearly 400, I've seen references to seed of Abraham going back 400 years. And I don't know many other communities in the world that can come up with that. 400 years. But the most powerful is Olaudah Equiano talking about, he mentioned, of course, he mentioned the analogies between Igbos and Jews, but he talked about Passover. This is far more powerful than referencing to what you raised. He talked about Igbos eating bitter herbs during the Passover. I don't know if you've thought about the implications of somebody talking about the Passover 200 years ago. And somebody who was just discussing this anecdotally, he had no interest. He wasn't thinking of Aliyah. He wasn't thinking of becoming Jewish. He wasn't thinking of anything. He was only looking at similarities between Jewish practice and Igbo practice 200 years ago. But 400 years ago, people found people on the banks of the river Niger, that is Igbo land, boasting we are seed of Abraham. And I do not know if any other group in the world apart from the Israelites are referred to as seed of Abraham.
Okay, so you're saying that Igbos were saying that and that's written and documented by Igbos?
No, by Westerners, by Western explorers. The book I saw was by a Western explorer, but he was citing what Igbos were saying.
Okay. Okay. All right. And that was before Christianity got there. Am I correct?
Christianity is just about 200 years old in Igbo land.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next question. As far as migration routes, how do you think the Igbos who are Jews got to Igbo land?
This is a very good question, because you managed now to separate Igbos and Jews. Because I believe that majority of the Igbos fit Hebrew, but a minority would fit the term Jewish. Because I know for a verity that some people that the identity Jewish would fit also joined other people that the identity Hebrew would fit. We essentially came in from the northern kingdom of Israel, through the southern kingdom, through Egypt, and then through the Sahara Desert. And the traces are still living till date. The old empires in West Africa, all the old empires in West Africa had Hebrew, Israelite, and Jewish communities. And the boundaries of some of them extended into Nigeria, into what we call Nigeria, because there was no Nigeria 200 years ago. And if there were Israelites all over the desert, if there were Jews all over the desert, if there were Hebrews all over the desert, and today we find a very huge number of Israelites, or with people who have said for centuries that they are Israelites, who can present culture and religion that is identical to the religion of the Israelites. It doesn't take It doesn't take anything for us to surmise what happened. The desert was a highway between the banks of the river Niger and the land of Israel. That's the route. That's the route which I have traveled myself. When I was beginning my research, I decided to travel that route. I got into the southern borders of Morocco. And I can't say that I found people in the desert today that we would say they have not assimilated, but the stories of Israelites having been in the desert are still being told from what we will call northern Nigeria up to Morocco, up to Mali, Morocco, and up to Mali, Morocco, Niger, all the settlements in the routes I described.
Okay. So let me get this straight now. So what about the NSUKKA find? That, I mean, I know earlier on you had George T. Baston. He was one of the proponents of the Igbos being Jews. He's one of the first that really put it down early in the 1900s. But one of the things that archaeologists found was there was an NSUKKA find showing that a lot of the Igbos were actually there like 2500 BC or before there was an Israel. So how do you account for those people who predate Israel or predate Abraham, who've been living in living in that region for that long time period? How do you account for those people?
No such archaeological discovery was made. People are simply trying to convert their fantasies into history.
Okay.
For God's sake, these people will be the first people that will claim that, assuming anything was found at NSUKKA, because nothing was found. As far as we know, nothing was found there. But assuming that anything was found at NSUKKA in prehistory, somebody that is rational and normal will begin to claim they were Igbos. For God's sake, does anybody in East Africa claim that the ancestors of modern man found in East Africa are Kenyans? No, this is part of the nonsense we have to contend with every day. People who have known only defeats in their history think that the way they could be grand and great is to invent lies and pass them off as history. Abraham is regarded by historians as prehistoric, and that was about 7,000 years ago. And now we have people claiming that 25,000 years ago they were Igbos. So Igbos will simply go and get into the Guinness Book of Records. That's what it means, because I don't see any other people claiming that prehistory belongs to them. If anything was found at NSUKKA, I'm not convinced anything has been found, because I don't see one notable archaeologist being associated with what you quoted. What I have come across, which I didn't bother to give attention, is some people simply engaged in fantasies, but assuming that any such thing was found. How do you connect it to the contemporary Igbos? How do you connect it?
I think how they connect it is the writing symbols. They think it's connected to the NCB writing, which is
you see, they are simply, people are also even creating problems for the Igbos by appropriating the NCBD, which is not Igbo.
Mm-hmm.
And Igbos have been in enough trouble in Nigeria that we shouldn't find the Igbos claiming the cultural heritage of others. NCBD belongs to the Ejagan people, not to the Igbos. But people want to be prominent at all costs, so they lie. Other Nigerians already complain that Igbos want to dominate them. And now we have Igbos lying that NCBD belongs to Igbos. It's not fair. We want to come to equity with clean hands. Other Nigerians already have issues with Igbos. Igbos suffered genocide. They said Igbos want to dominate them, when the reality was that Igbos were known to be hard workers. But now, their claims will be justified when they begin to wake up to the fact that an Igbo woke up in the morning and began to claim that CBD belongs to Igbos. CBD does not belong to Igbos. And in CBD, the location of CBD is hundreds of miles away from NSUKKA.
Okay. But seeing that well, I'm not going to go too deep into that. But let's move on to the next question. The Obadiah Alliance's ruling on the Igbo stated that the Igbo have Y chromosomes, which reveal links with Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews. When asked about the statement, Rabbi Demoda directed those interested to you. Can you elaborate on the wide DNA connection between Igbos and mainstream Jewish populations?
Much of my work has been based on culture, religion, and history. I have only used DNA to support what I just mentioned. I think the best person to look at the issue of the relationship between the Igbo DNA and the Jewish DNA would be the chairman of Obadiah Alliance, who has spent more time studying DNA and how it works. My interest in DNA was only to find if Igbo people's DNA matched the DNA of people who are living in the land of Israel, and it matched. And I did not go beyond that.
Okay. Because he's saying to come to you. He's saying we should go to you. That's what the person who gave me the question is saying. That's why they're asking. But let me ask you this. Let's use a simple example. Because I think in the past, I do remember you referring to your personal DNA. Have you put that out in the public before, if I remember correctly? Your personal DNA?
Of course, my personal DNA is even is on the cover of one of my books. I used the map produced by my heritage to make a front cover of one of my books. So it's out in the public domain. My heritage produced a map of what they found in my DNA, and the three greatest concentrations, the three places where the greatest concentrations of my genes are found are the Levant, Nigeria, and East Africa. Of course, getting into GEDMASH and doing the analysis, I have distant cousins in Latvia.
Okay. All right. Let me see here. All right. Do you believe other groups in West Africa, such as the Iwi and the Yoruba, are also Israelites?
I don't think that belief is the right word to use.
Okay.
Because I would say that I have not studied them. I do not essentially work on beliefs. If I want to know a particular thing, I study it. I studied Yoruba history since Yorubas are my compatriots.
Yes, sir.
And Yorubas are very clear in their history about their origins, which is that everybody in the world originated from Yorubas. And Yorubas have kingdoms that have existed since more than 800 years, unbroken, which keep their traditions, and none of the kingdoms states that they have Israelite origin. So my belief is really immaterial. I'm concentrating on what their history says now, which we studied that in school. And I have come across very, very important Yorubas, like the Oni of Ife. They are laughing of Oyo. These are the two most important kings of Yorubas. They say that the Igbos are Israelites. They don't say that they are Israelites. And that is that. Then as for the Ewe, they are not Nigerians. So I have not had the opportunity to study their history in depth. I'm not a specialist in that.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Ethiopian Jews. What are your thoughts on their origin and the history attached to these particular Jews?
I have done enough work on Jewish culture that showed me a connection between Ethiopian Jewish culture and Igbo Jewish culture. I mean, and Igbo Israelite culture. For example, the Igbo people would not give a decent or regular burial to a person that commits suicide. The Igbos will never do that. If an Igbo person takes the life, the Igbos will not accord that person a regular Igbo burial. Fortunately, this was written in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Because even though it is Igbo tradition, which no Igbo will doubt, I have a reason for being emphatic on this point, and allow me to be. Even the Igbos that talk about NSUKKA and in CBD, they would not doubt that if an Igbo takes the life, that Igbo is not accorded a regular burial. And this is Igbo tradition. And this is Israelite tradition. And this is not Yoruba tradition. This is not Yoruba tradition. So the Yorubas, there is a time it is okay to commit suicide. So the Igbos that are finding other traditions of origins for Igbos, going to NSUKKA, claiming that archaeology discovered this or that, would not doubt this. But because we have people who cannot be held accountable, we may have people saying, or people who cannot bother to ask an Igbo, is this Igbo tradition? So we are fortunate that Chinua Achebe wrote about this tradition in 1959. How many years is 1959 now? 63 years. 64 years.
64 years, right.
64 years. Achebe published Things Fall Apart. An Igbo person committed suicide by hanging himself. The Igbos told the colonial authorities, you have stopped us from giving this man a good burial because you forced him to take his life. This is quintessentially an Israelite tradition. It is found in Ethiopian Jewish culture. In their cemeteries in Ethiopia, if an Ethiopian Jew takes the life, they don't mourn him. They bury him outside the graveyard. So, the culture tells me that they and the Igbos drew from one source.
Interesting.
It's the culture that tells me this. I rely on history, but I rely more on culture because culture is more infallible. Culture is more reliable than even history.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to something that's very important, circumcision. Circumcision is used as a main reason for a connection to Jews. What about the traditions of female circumcision and male circumcision, dates fluctuating between 1 and 8 days or even older? What do you feel about that as far as circumcision and Igbo?
Among the Igbo? Huh?
Yes, among the Igbo, yes.
Of course, the male circumcision is universal. I don't think there is anybody, again, doubting that it's universal among the Igbo. And by the way, not universal in Africa. Not universal in Africa or West Africa. Not common. Because I've seen writings that say that it's common in Africa. Of course, it's not. We grew up in Africa. We know that majority of the people don't circumcise their males. Traditionally. So, then the female circumcision, what I will do is a guess. It's an assimilated tradition. or maybe a carryover from the Semitic phobia of the Israelite culture. Because we tend to forget that Israelite culture did not fall from the tree. It also came from a tradition. And I don't know if the Semites were circumcising women. If it's not something we carried over from our Semitic past, then it's something that we assimilated from our neighbors. Because for God's sake, everybody assimilates. I know Jewish friends who lived under communism in Europe, in the Soviet Union, who were not circumcised at all.
Okay, that's a good point. All right. As we move forward
Because the general European culture of not circumcising influenced them.
Okay. So as we are you finished? Are you finished, Mr. Ilona?
Yes.
Yeah, check up a little bit. Okay. All right. As we move forward in 2023, what are your hopes for the future of Igbos and Igbo Jews and moving back to Israel? Is there any plans to do like a mass migration to Israel? Is there anything you propose as far as going back to Israel?
Our plans, I'm talking about the men and the defenders, the group and its Secretary General and Chairman of the Elders Council. The group that has dedicated its time, its resources, and made it its mission to reduce, to heal, to rehabilitate the Igbo people. Our primary focus is to rebuild the Hebrew Igbo republics.
Okay, beautiful.
To rebuild the Hebrew Igbo republics. We do not have anything against anybody that wants to go anywhere. But our goal is to rebuild, rehabilitate the 16,000 miles of territory that God gave us in West Africa that you may call Igbo land today, where we built a Hebrew civilization that had no prostitutes, no destitutes, no prisons. Of course, we know that these things were what obtained there. But very importantly, these things were noted by the colonialists who were oppressing us. When the British came to West Africa, many of their writers noted that among the Igbo people, they generally called us Igbo. There were no prostitutes, there were no destitutes, and we know there were no prisons and kings. And these republics lasted for over 500 years. And when what I described to you were not found among the Igbos, they were found in other parts of what became Nigeria. They were found in Europe. If you read Oliver Twist, the orphans were mistreated by his time in England. But in England, in Igbo land, the orphans were taken care of. Our mission is to rebuild it and to rebuild our diaspora. There are Igbos in every corner of the world today. Our goal is to bring them up, rehabilitate them, revive them, that they will be a light to the world. When this is done, when we have achieved this to an appreciable extent, we are ready to engage with related peoples about how to centralize Israelite culture, because it has a lot to offer the world. Unfortunately, while we have the Torah, we are now having the source that the Torah cites. That is Onenana. That is the Igbo history, religion. I mean, that is the Igbo culture and religion.
Okay.
As I mentioned in my last interview with Ashriel, Ben Israel of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, there are parts of Israelite culture that you must understand the Igbo culture to understand. I give an example. When the writers of the Hebrew Bible said Haran died in the face of the Father, to know what the Hebrew Bible, what the writers of the Hebrew Bible meant, you must know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean. If you don't know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean, you can never understand what it means for somebody to die in the face of the Father. You must, I'm not saying you may, you must know what the Igbos understand that phrase to mean. He died in the face of the Father. Haran was the brother of Abraham. The writers of the Hebrew Bible said he died in the face of the Father. If every Bible you can lay your hands on, look at all the commentaries in Hebrew and English, he died in the face of the Father remains not understood until you ask the Igbos, what does it mean when somebody dies in the face of the Father? Ihu is face. If somebody dies while the Father is alive, the lineage of the person that dies while the Father is alive loses the right of succeeding the Father if that person that died was the first son. I'm going to talk about it soon because it gives us an idea, a clue, that Abraham's priesthood is logical. Because I suspect that Haran was the first son of that gentleman. But after he died, logically Abraham is successful to their father. So even though he was given a different culture, which he became a priest of, but he also was a priest in his father's house. Thank you.
All right. All right. I was going to ask you what you're currently working on, but you basically elaborated on all of that when you spoke about Israel and the group of folks in Igbo land. Let's get back to, I got 3 more questions and then we're done. As I said, I only wanted to do 45 minutes. I didn't want to make it a lengthy interview for hours and so forth. Is it true that Igbos had a tradition as far as holy days? Do you see any Jewish connection with the holy days or holidays that the Igbos practice in modern times?
In the first, to respond to the first question, Igbos did not have a 4-day week. What Igbos did was what everybody in the world did. There was a time up to Egypt, up to Iraq, up to Europe. Markets were revolving every 4 days. If people remove their produce from the land, from the ground, they have to have markets that come around often so that those produce will not decay. Like assuming you remove lettuce from your farm and there is no market, the lettuce will spoil, it will decay. So what some people have chosen to call weeks are those 4 market days that revolve round and round and round. But refer to most older books about culture in most parts of the world, some have 3. Some have markets that come around every 3 days. Some have some that come around every 5 days. Some have markets that come around every 4 days. These are not weeks. Ancient man did not have a notion of weeks as we have them today until the Roman culture permeated the world. And we have this current calendar we call Julian or Gregorian calendar.
Gregorian, right?
Yeah. That answers the first question. The second question is, of course, starting from the most common, the Sabbath, up to today, in my own republic, you cannot work You cannot walk on Ekuku on Poru Day. The community will stop you. The only things done on Ekuku on Poru are making merry, soft merry with your kinsmen. You go to the Obi. If you have palm wine, you share with your brothers and with your brothers. The women are in the house, the men are in the Obi. No funerals, no wedding, no going to the market, no going to the farm on Poru and the Keuku days. This is just one. I've talked about Sabbath, which is the most common. Then, of course, we Olaude Piano 200 years ago mentioned the Passover. That's a feast. Sukkot, Imantu, of course, oh sure. So we have the feast days, the biblical feast days, the ones you find in the Torah. We have them, and the Jews have them too, since you are interested in the connection between our feast days and Jewish feast days.
Okay. All right. Not the final question, but do you see a connection with the Lemba Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, and the Igbo Jews? Do you see any form of connection with all those three groups?
You see, I think inadvertently you frame the question perfectly. Yes, there are Igbos that are practicing Judaism. They are the Igbo Jews. So these Igbos that are practicing Judaism, I believe that they are developing connections with Lemba that are practicing Judaism, with Ethiopians that are practicing Judaism. So there are connections. But if you are talking about the Hebrew nation, which you can also call the Igbo nation, there is no connection, there is no contact yet with the Lemba or with the Ethiopian. But I hope you know that there was diplomatic relations between the Igbo nation and the state of Israel. Full diplomatic relations. Something bigger than normal diplomatic relations. Up to 1970.
Mm-hmm. All right. So my final question is, based on all your years involved with this study, have you any doubts on your source and your information as far as Igbos being Jews? Have you ever had any doubts of your information?
I have never doubted that Igbos are Igbos. How can I doubt that Igbos are Igbos? It will be tantamount to my doubting that Remy is Remy. I live as a Hebrew. That is what I live as. When my children came into the world, I circumcised the boy on the 8th day. Their mother went into seclusion. My wife went into seclusion for 3 months. This is what Hebrews do, or this is what Hebrews did. So why would I be in any doubt? I've never entertained any doubt. Why should I? When I know that if I open my mouth and utter 20 Igbo words, up to 8 of them may have Hebrew words that are almost the same thing in spelling and sound. So why would there be room for doubt?
Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, Remy Ilona, I want to say thank you for coming through, man. You've been wonderful, and we went overtime actually because I wanted to do 45 minutes. But let me ask you this: would you be willing to do a panel discussion? Because I do want to incorporate an African connection, a Caribbean connection, and an African American connection, where those who are claiming they're Igbos and those who are claiming that they follow a Hebraic tradition could all converse on this great topic here that we're talking about today, because it's a very important topic and a lot of people are involved in it, whether they agree or whether they're skeptical about the whole conversation or not. And I wanted to bring this to the community so that folks, I didn't want to be adversarial or even push you in a certain direction, because I wanted the family to see you in the light that you're pushing and why you're pushing it. And to me, you are genuine. You're not somebody who is just saying, "Hey," you woke up one day and say, "Hey, I'm a Hebrew." I think you're culturally making the connection. I think you're trying your best to encourage folks who have Igbo backgrounds to look into this more. And I don't have a problem with that because you're actually doing the work. So I must commend you on that. All right. And again, I must say thank you for taking out the time. We've been trying to do this for months, but scheduling issues and so forth. And I do appreciate you taking the time out today. I want to say thank you.
Thank you too. Of course, with the parameters you mentioned, Igbos, African Americans, and Caribbeans who believe they are descended from Igbos, for sure I will be willing to talk to them. I will be willing to be in a panel with them because I believe that we need to talk more. We need to expand outreach. We need to talk more. We need to have more conversation. We need to create fora for everybody to bring what they have on the table. That is the only way we could grow, rebuild our communities. So I'm your guest anytime you bring that up.
Yes, sir. I want to say again, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Remy Ilona. Peace and love to y'all. Peace.
Thank you.
All righty. So that's the segment for Remy Ilona. So now I'm going to present to you guys an alternative position with my brother Medicine Shell, who was on my show a couple months ago, and I'm just gonna play this for the people. All right, hold on one second. Let me make sure this is right. Culture. What is it you would tell her?
Oh wow.
Let me set this view up so that we could be side by side. Hold on, if full screen. Let's do this view here. Let me know how the sound is, family. Let me know how the sound is. Do this right here. All right. So peace and love. How you doing, by the way? How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Like we were saying before we went live, I've been watching a couple of the episodes you've had. So interesting stuff, and I'm honored to be here, of course.
All right, cool. A lot of folks in the West don't understand Igbo culture, right? And we pretend to know. I always said I wanted to be an initiate of some form of Akan culture or the Igbo culture, because in my DNA I see a lot of it, and especially Igbo. I'm all the way up to 64% now with Igbo, and in 23andMe. So there's a lot of Igbo in my bloodstream from Jamaica. So a lot of Igbos came through Jamaica. 50% actually in the slave trade came through Jamaica. And we have words like uno and different words that we know correspond with the Igbo culture and language. What is the most important thing in your eyes you would want somebody? You just met somebody, you met a girl and you like her. And you said, I want to tell her something great about Igbo culture. What is it you would tell her?
Oh wow. Oh man, good question. Wow. I think the thing as far as Igbo culture goes that I find most beneficial as far as I myself as a person is that Igbo culture has compared to a lot of cultures, a radical level of self-belief, right? Much of what is in Igbo culture is honing and harnessing or cultivating an individual to be able to accept and embrace themselves and their truth and to stand firm in it and confidently. You understand? I think that is something that's really missing in a lot of contemporary societies, and I'm very glad to be from and exposed to a culture that has kept that intact and made it very central to who they are. So,
Okay. All right. So one of the first things, how long have you been practicing the culture itself?
for sure. It's a birth thing. So I was born into an Igbo family. I'm an Igbo man completely. I want Mama East, that type of thing. I was born in the U.S., but around the age 3 or 4, my parents, no, my apologies, 4. My parents moved us to Nigeria to live in our community. One thing you'll know about Igbo culture is that it's very community centric. And on top of being community centric, everybody is very close to their ancestral land. So the place where their earliest ancestors come from. So We went back to that place, for which for me is a town known as, or called Awamama, a segment of that town called Umokwe. So I lived there for my formative years. All of my earliest memories are from there and so forth. But I didn't, when I came back to the US, I was still, involved in the culture on the level that most people are, but I didn't go deep into the inner workings, what we now call Odinani, the philosophy, the spirituality, and so forth, until about 3 or 4 years ago, around 2017-ish. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Did you have your family grew up practicing Igbo culture? Both parents?
Yeah, the thing is, most Igbo people practice Igbo culture just by default, right?
Mhm.
So the thing that I present, which we call Odinani, is the explanation as to why. A lot of them do it and they don't know why they're doing it. Now, I was lucky growing up in a family where my father was not religious at all. Like he wasn't, the big obstacle a lot of people have to Igbo culture, to accessing their own Igbo culture, is the prevalence of Christianity in the area, right? So a lot of people, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm Christian, so on and so forth. And African Christianity, as well as I believe Caribbean Christianity, is tailor fitted to make you anti-African, right? So
Right.
all of a sudden, all of the evil things are the African things, right? So that's usually people's hurdle. Well, I never had that hurdle growing up.
Right.
I was not unique in the sense that everybody who's Igbo practices, Igbo participates in Igbo culture, but being able to participate in the more intimate or the more meaningful aspects of it, like watching masquerades, participating with masquerades, seeing rituals and traditions done, and then learning the intricacies. I never had a block as far as that goes because we didn't have a Christian quote unquote household. My mother was Christian, but it was her thing. She didn't really try to put it on anybody else.
Right. All right. So now, have you studied like the Bible as far as from a Hebraic perspective? Have you ever looked at it from a Hebraic perspective?
I have. No, I wouldn't call myself a biblical scholar. One of
Right.
the things Odinani has taught me is to not speak on what I don't know. So I wouldn't call myself a scholar in that respect, but I have looked very
Well, you
closely.
pretty much know the tenets though, the tenets of
Yeah,
Judaism.
for sure.
Oh, okay, because a lot of one of the main things why I'm trying to get Igbo what's his name? I don't know what his name is, but he runs the page, the Igbo Siren, Shine. I forgot what the name of it. You had interviewed him.
Cybershine.
Right. If you
Yeah,
could connect me to him, that would be beautiful. Because
That's my main man. So absolutely, we can make that
yeah.
happen.
All right, cool. One of the things that he points out on his website is the connection of Igbo culture with Igbo culture and comparing it to what people are claiming. He's very good at that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Someone would point out certain things within Leviticus and Deuteronomy and say, hey, the Igbo culture is doing this. So those people that came over, Igbo is from them. What do you say about that?
Like, okay, so like seeing parallels between Leviticus and Igbo culture, yeah. The thing people have to understand about when they're assessing cultures is that parallel does not, or similarity does not mean the same, or does not mean common origin, or does not even mean relationship, right? We have this mentality that it is just today, or just now, or just with the preeminence of white culture over the world that people began thinking scientifically or doing things with logic and reason. So a lot of times what you have in ancient cultures is the exact same mentality we have today, where we are doing what works. You understand? Oh, that doesn't work. We're not going to do that anymore. So if somebody is standing in Israel and they're describing the sky, and somebody is standing in my own community of Umokwe and describing the sky, we're going to say a similar thing. It doesn't mean we're the same people or we're related to each other. We're just pointing to the same direction. So if you see laws in Leviticus that are similar to each other, you can go to China and there'll be reservations against murder, and you can go to Belgium and there's reservations against murder, and it doesn't mean that they're the same people, right? So that type of thing.
So circumcision is a conversation that is very important. People think that Igbo culture practice the same circumcision as the Jews. Can you explain circumcision, how in Igbo culture someone gets circumcised?
Yeah, for sure. Circumcision is done like in most African cultures, on the 8th day, right? The cosmology behind it is that when a child is born, the Igbo calendar has 4 days, right? So for 2 cycles of 4 days, we don't consider the child a full member of Alam Madu, which is the physical world that we exist in. They are still part spirit, part person. So we are waiting for that child to show themselves for 8 days and reveal who they are until they are fully initiated into Alam Madu, out of respect for where they are coming from, which is Alam Mo, the lack of better terms, the world of spirits or the spiritual world. You understand? So on that 8th day, that child is officially, we know that this child has come to stay. If you stay for 2 cycles of 4 days, this child's here to stay. This child wants to be a part of our world. And so then the initiation process begins for that child. For traditionally, for both men and women, it was a circumcision process. There's also the cutting of the fingernails and the burial of the afterbirth with a seed to create that child.
What do you say? What do you say when the person said, well, we as Jews, we circumcise on the 8th day too? So what do you say to that?
Yeah, so this is the thing. So I said earlier, every African culture, right? And if you look at where Israel is, it is a stone, like you can throw a rock from Egypt to Israel. You understand? So all of the cultures surrounding Egypt and going south and going central and going west and east throughout the entire African continent has either this exact same tradition or a parallel tradition to it. So a lot of the issue with the Hebrew thing is when people make those comparisons, I can place a pretty strong bet that they don't know much about any other culture except maybe the Bible and then a couple that the ones that personally relate to them. So if you look at the whole of Africa, that exact same 8-day tradition pops up again and again and again, right?
Can you get circumcised older than 8 days?
Yes, you can get circumcised older than 8 days if need be.
For male and female?
Male and female. In some places in Igbo land, females are circumcised in adulthood, and then also a lot of times it is not adulthood, but like puberty, sometimes adulthood, and then a lot of times it's up to the family, right? It's family choice.
So circumcision of the female, what is the purpose of that in the culture?
Circumcision of female is the same thing. So there is the view is that a woman, right, is a connection between two forces. And a lot of this I explain on my channel and so forth, as far as the forces I'm going to refer to. So for those who are just new to this, I may say some things you're not aware of. So a woman is a combination is a physical manifestation of the feminine elements of the universe, right? Now the feminine elements have two predominant ones. There's Miri, which is water, Nemiri, right? And then there's Ana, which is the earth, right? So as when a woman is young or when she's new into the world, she is of the world of water, is what is said. And then she makes an official transition into the world of earth. And then once she makes that transition is when the circumcision is done. But the clitoris is identified as associated with that particular aspect of her essence. So in some places, they don't see that transition as necessary in Igbo culture. So there's an understanding that this is what it is, and then everybody makes their decision accordingly. So some families or some communities will say, well, we don't care, that's not necessary. Some of them say we're going to do it immediately so that, she makes the transition immediately. Some of them do it later and so forth. I come to find that even historically, richer families tended to do it later or not at all. So that kind of.
Okay. All right. What about praying to God? Like you have Choku, you have Chiniki, you have all type of different names that goes along. I want to know, because there's an Igbo brother that came on Saturday. He said something that fascinated me. That he said you don't pray directly to Choku. So now in Judaism, and pardon me for doing the comparison every time we talk, but I want to make that point through the video so people could cut it up and see what they want to know. You don't pray directly to Choku. You would pray to your chi or your community deity. Wow, I learned something new Saturday. I never knew this. And that's amazing, because I always tell people I don't have a God per se. My God, I would consider my parents. So ancestor worship is a part of my culture. So I'm already following my culture and I don't even know it. But go ahead, brother, elaborate on it.
Yeah, no. So some of these things come from the bones, you know. They're not a lot of people in diaspora, when I make my videos, they say, "Oh, we already do that," or "I've been doing that, but nobody told me to." And I always say the same thing again and again. So in Igbo cosmology, God, the full name for God is Chineke. That is Chi and Eke. Now, that is not one God. It is
Mm,
two, it's a family, it's a couple. It is a
mhm.
father, which is the Chi, and a mother, which is the Eke. The Chi is the unmanifest creator. Eke, the mother, is the manifest creator, right? So you could, if you want to call Eke the universe, then there you go. You understand?
Hold on a
So
second. Hold on 1 second. The family saying that you sound low. Is there
I
something you
sound
could
low.
press low? Yeah.
Okay, let me try something. Let me try to. Do I sound better now?
It would have to be. You sound fine to me. I'm just saying for them. But family on the replay, just turn up your volume loud when he's speaking. All right. Pardon me for the sound problems, but hey, we're in the internet world, and we try to get this information. All right. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah.
You just bring down the chi and the ek. Go ahead, brother.
I'll try to speak louder and I'll come a little closer. Yeah.
All right.
So the God is a couple, is a mother and a father. We don't believe that the creator of the universe can just create, a man can just pull a child out of itself, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Whatever it is that conceives is feminine. So there's chi and eke, chineke. That's what that
Mm,
word means.
mm.
Even with Jamaican patois, I know you guys say na. You understand?
Yeah.
So the middle part is the same. It's the same na. Chineke.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Wow.
exactly. So this couple is also the formula for creation. So
Mm,
all things are chi and eke, and that pattern repeats itself again and again and again. That's how creation happens, right? That's all of creation. So I myself, right? I am eke. I am a physical part of the universe, right? I am made of minerals. I am made of the same thing as the stars, so on and so forth. I'm a part of creation. That is eke. And then as eke as creation, I have a chi, which is that spark that conceives me, that brings me into the universe and so forth, right? So the connection to Chukwu is not emphasized in Igbo cosmology because Chukwu is within me. I'm a manifestation of Chukwu as well. So I would pray to my personal chi, and that
mm.
personal chi is the container of my individual and personal truth. That's why earlier when you were saying, or when you had asked what was one of the things that I liked about Igbo culture, or I would present to a girl and that type of thing, is that radical self-acceptance, that your creator created you perfectly and you have a direct connection to that facet of the greater creator, right? Through that personal creator. And but then your neighbor also has their own, and we don't have to be the same. You understand? That person's chi is going to tell them to do and be this person. My chi is going to tell me to do and be this person. My obligation to my chi is to listen and learn and that kind of
You
thing.
know, it's funny you say that because I always tell people if you have a connection to a God, you should have your own personal connection. So when you
Yes.
have a group, this is how you create cults, though. You create cults by saying we have to worship the same way. We got to pray the
Absolutely.
same way.
Yeah.
That's how you create cults. So I like that. I like that. So that lines up with me again as an individual. All right.
Well, it's a that's that 60% talking. So
All right. So
yeah,
so now let's look at the foods that people eat.
for sure.
You know, you have in the Jewish tradition, you have kosher foods, and you have and you have foods that are not considered kosher. So,
Yeah.
what about the pig? Do Igbo men
Uh,
eat pork?
this is something that is debated. So people debate it because I don't know, they just want to debate it. So I can't give you a definitive answer whether there's taboos for and against. I will say this though, because the Igbo tradition is based off of the self, is based on the self. A
Mhm,
lot of the times, your diet or what you are to eat on a spiritual level is based on what you are trying to do and who you are trying to be, right? So the way I said again, I'm AK, I'm a part of creation, but then I have a chi. There are individuals who make a vow to connect themselves to their chi and to be a physical representation of their chi into the world. Because they have made that vow and they've decided to be that person, they're going to have specific dietary laws that they follow. And
mhm.
some of them, in some communities, object to the eating of pork. In other communities, the dietary laws are not as strict. They're more so how you eat, how you kill the animal, for example, if I take like a vow to become an Nze, which is I've chosen to be a representation of God the Father in my community, right? So I'm aligning myself with my chi, that type of thing. I can only eat food that was made by my wife. I cannot eat food made by anybody else, things like that. But that's not a law for every single person. That's that person who has decided to take that route, right? So there's no Igbo people do not eat pork. There's no, you can't do that in Igbo culture. You understand? Because it goes from the bottom up rather than the top down. So you can't make overarching rules. But do people eat pork right now and today? Absolutely. You understand?
Okay. What about the traditions of Igbo land? I know Igbo land, you have different areas, you know, different people who are they're all Igbo, but you have different parts in the Igbo culture that have different areas that have different oral traditions. I notice when I'm studying the Igbo, they don't have a tradition that they come from Israel per se, but lately, since like the 80s or 90s, people have been saying that.
Yeah,
So it
100%.
seems like it's a new thing, but yeah, can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So I have also looked into it as well, because it's one of the things that people request I make a video about. So there'll be definitely one coming soon, right? And of course, my good friend Onyemobi with the Igbo Cyber Shrine has gone in detail on there. So if anybody wants to read about it, check out the Igbo Cyber Shrine. But there was a thing that happened in Nigeria in the 1970s called Festak, the Festival of African Culture. And what happened is because Nigeria is a diverse country, right? So everybody came and presented their cultures. Now the Yorubas had done something with their culture because they're like us, where each area has their own tradition. But the Yoruba leadership at that time had decided to merge everything and create a monomyth for all Yoruba people. You understand? To create it. It is not shared by everybody. The Oduduwa story that everybody hears about is specifically the story of the Ile Ife people. You understand? And people from places like Ekiti and so forth, that's not their tradition. But the leaders said, we're going to go with this one, right? So they presented that at the Festival of African Culture around the 70s, right? So after observing that, a group of Igbo people, right? Some Igbo people decided that we need one as well. Let's make one for everybody as well. So they took the story of Eri. Now the story of Eri is the story of about 12 villages, not 12, maybe eight villages in the like central Anambra area, one part of Igbo land, right? Now, when I say 12 villages or 12 towns, you have to know that Igbo land is a combination of close to, I'll give a rough guess of 200 towns, if not more, right? So this is like 8 out of them. And they have a story of an individual named Eri who came down from the sky, right? Eri came down from the sky. It is said that Eri sits on the right hand of Chukwu. He was sent down to the sky at the time when human beings were transitioning from being light beings to being beings of physical flesh. So he came down. There's a long story that goes with it. If you want to hear it, I can go ahead and go into it. But I'll just to answer your question. They took that story and they said, "Oh, Eri, Eri. Okay, this correlates with Eri in the Bible because they have what's called bibliocentric thinking in Nigeria." And this was something that happened a lot in early Europe too, or in Europe as well, where if you were the understanding of the world had to be based off of the Bible, right? It was specifically based off the Bible. So whenever people thought about history, they would look, okay, who in the Bible am I? So this group of Igbo people around the 1980s took a look at the Bible and said, okay, they have an ERI, we have an ERI. Ours is Eri, theirs is Eri. You understand? So they said, okay, then the Eri is actually this person. Then after a while, he no longer came down from the sky, right? He now is coming from Israel, right? And his children are now the progenitors of all Igbo people. Now, despite what you see online, on the ground, especially with older people, that myth is not accepted. And in fact, it's kind of insulting because again, Igbo culture is very much about me, and then I'm an individual sovereign thing in the world, and I'm gonna build peace and accord with the people around me, but nobody's going to dominate me and tell me who I am and that type of thing. I'm going to tell you who I am. So for you to tell me from our mama that I'm a descendant of Eri is actually it's egregious in Igbo culture. You can't do that. But children and younger people, especially of the Gen X generation, were not taught these, and millennials were not taught these things. So they go online, they're hearing all these stories that came from the 1980s and 1990s, and they're now carrying it because there was a vacuum of knowledge for them. So that's where a lot of that came from. It was the Fest Act in 1970. And as you observe, there's a steep decline in the quality of scholarship on Igbo culture from that point on.
Hmm. I'd never heard about that festival before, and
Yeah.
that's very interesting. I would love to get some more information on that as far as that is concerned. All right, what about holidays? What's the main holy day in Igbo land?
Yeah. So again, every land, every community in Igbo culture, your community is your country, right? So we know ourselves as Igbo people just because we know there are people who are not Igbo. But before that, me being from our mama, that was my country. Somebody from Newi is a foreigner to to an extent. So my traditions and my customs and holidays are going to be based off of the interpretation of the cosmology of the land and my own specific history, right? But you do see parallels. You will see parallels. You will see that on the seventh moon, typically in July, June time. You're going to see a lot of masquerades are going to come out in different communities. Those different communities will have different masquerades and different names for it based off the traditions of their land and their history. You understand? But there are a few overarching celebrations. One that I can say covers all of Igbo land is the New Yam Festival, right? Iriji. Some people call it Ahanjoku. Some people call it Njokuji and so forth, which
Mhm.
is a celebration of the first harvest of the year. So that one you're going to see throughout Igbo land. But in my place, we have a celebration or a holiday known as Owu, where during that same seventh month, a marine or river-based or water-based celebration and masquerade is going to emerge and roam the city, and a lot of different things are going to be done. But in neighboring communities, they don't have that. So the connector for everybody is the New Yam Festival. Now, the New Yam Festival is not specific to Igbo culture. They practice it throughout Africa. The Akan practice it, the Yoruba practice it, and even beyond them, and so forth.
So what goes on with the Yam Festival? What do you guys do?
Absolutely. So New Yam Festival is the entire community coming together to celebrate the first harvest. What happens is there's typically a host family for the New Yam Festival. It's usually in the modern day, if you have a monarch, some communities have a monarch. It's usually going to be the monarch's clan or family, right? So everybody's going to gather there, and the eldest man in that group or the leader of that community will say a prayer for everybody, right? He will pray for the entire community. Everybody is going to contribute something from what they grew. The apex leader of the community is going to cut the yam after the prayer, and it is a holiday of feasting. Now, at the same time, there's a lot going on as far as different masquerades coming out, typically celebratory masquerades that don't have too much spiritual undertone, just kind of secular masquerades will come out and just to dance and celebrate with the kids and things like that. People will dance. There's a lot of visitation of homes. Those who are rich are encouraged in this time to go to those who are poor and
Poor.
provide gifts and so forth, provide them
Hmm.
with gifts and fruits of their harvest and that type of thing. So all in all, it's very much a Thanksgiving type of
Right.
situation.
What about calendar systems? What calendar do you guys follow? Do you follow the Gregorian calendar? So is the new year January 1st in Igbo
No,
land?
no.
Okay. When is the new year?
So this is gonna sound funny, but there is no new year in Igbo culture. And I'll explain why. So we follow the lunar calendar. In the Igbo calendar, there are 13 moons. I don't have 7 moons. There are 13 moons. Within those 13 moons, a week is 4 days, right? So there are
Hmm.
7 weeks in a moon. The 4 days are Eke, Urye, Afo, and Nkwo, and that is the calendar in Igbo land. Now, there's a thing in Igbo culture where you don't count your years because you only count things that you're anticipating to see the end of, right? So if I'm counting my money, I want to know exactly when that money ends. But if I start counting, you know what I mean? Or if I'm counting my years, right, then I mean same mentality. So we never have an officially pronounced new year. You understand? But there are markers within a year where you'll know, okay, and an entire moon has passed, such as the New Yam, right? New Yam festivals typically take place in the fall. Some communities will have it one moon, and some will have it another, but there's never a differentiation between, like, there's usually 1 or 2 moons. And then there's the new moon, which is what we're under right now, right? So when we talk about a lunar calendar, we're observing the sky. So we're seeing when the moon returns back to its point of origin. So we're currently in the new moon time right now. But because the way Igbo numerology works, the first moon is typically not considered the first year because the number 1 is not a manifesting number. It needs 2, just like the Chianeke. So a lot of the celebrations in Igbo culture that look like New Year's will happen on the second moon. And it's interesting too, because in North America and the Caribbean, this is when Carnival happens. This is when Mardi Gras happens. These are all these African big celebrations happen on
Right.
that second moon. Exactly, happen on that second moon, right? But we wouldn't
Beautiful.
call Mardi Gras a New Year celebration. It's just Mardi Gras, that kind of thing.
All right, cool. Let's take a look at, you say you have a 4-day week. Is that traditional in Africa? Because the only person I found, because I was reading this book about African cultures and calendar, was the Akan people. They have a 7-day week, which is very rare in West Africa. So most cultures have like a 4-day week, 5-day week, or 3-day week. So with the 4-day week you have, so obviously, I mean, they go by the 7-day week in the Hebrew culture.
Yeah.
And again, I'm trying to see how they correlate and everything. Okay, so Yahweh, you guys don't pray to Chukwu or to Chineke directly, right?
Yes.
There's no such thing in okay. All right. Do you guys believe in an afterlife?
We believe in reincarnation. Right? So
Okay.
I am somebody's afterlife, and somebody will be my afterlife.
Wow.
Believe in reincarnation.
So
right?
we live forever. All energy is constant. Let's change its form.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like I'm in the movies now. All right. All right. Let me see what else I could if I see, let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Because you can't stay too long. But any questions in the chat? Ask the brother, are Igbo still Biafrans, and can he explain Biafrans?
Yeah, yes. So if you go to Igbo land, right, and you go to a lot of the surrounding cultures, I can even take it very far into Cameroon and a little bit in like deep into Cameroon, you're going to notice that there's a united or an algorithm, right, of culture where there's no overarching control over this area, but we're all following the same type of program, that type of thing. Then you cross over and all of a sudden you're encountering cultures that don't do that. You understand? So as somebody who is able, if you're able to travel or able to study and see, it becomes very obvious, right? That there's something in this specific area that makes them one. That if I follow the customs of my village, even though they differentiate here and there, if I behave like an Awo Mama man in Bamileke, Cameroon, I'm not going to violate any tenets in their culture whatsoever. You understand? There's a correlation. So people have identified this area under the name of Biafra and said that, okay, there's something here. We are a similar people. It's closer to saying Germanic for, let's say, those who are familiar with European history, where you can go to Germany, go to the Netherlands, go to Denmark, and go to England and see, okay, there's something similar with all these places that Italy doesn't have, right? So people have identified that area as Biafra and go by the name of Biafra and so forth. A lot of the Europeans came to the land and called that general area Biafra and so forth. So even as far as physical appearance, you'll know if you start paying attention to those things, you'll know when somebody is at least a Biafran. You understand? Okay, I can see that type of thing. So that is the general understanding as far as Biafra goes. And then from there, there are people within Igbo culture, or most probably the majority of us, are trying to actualize that reality into a sovereign nation. Because in both places Biafrans find themselves in, Nigeria and Cameroon, they're facing a lot of either attempted oppression or deliberate sabotage as far as their efforts and so forth. And in general, they feel they would be better off on their own, managing their own affairs.
Beautiful. All right. So what about there's something you guys have called the 4 ages, which is similar to Hindu cosmological thought. Can you explain that?
Yes. So in Igbo culture, we have what is called Uga, right? Uga is, if you look at the root verb of uga, is the word ga, which is to go, the journey or travel. In our understanding, human history is a matter of movements. Anything that still doesn't have a history, right? So we are measuring the movements of the human existence in 4 ages. The first age, the 4 ages are Ugaka, Ugachi, Ugangu, and I can't think of the last one, Ugazi, which is where we're in right now, right? Ugaka is the first age. It is said that in Ugaka, this was the age of the light beings. During this age, human beings, so in the humanity comes from the chi, comes from what we can now call chuku, which is the chi of the universe, right? And the chuku is said to dwell in what is known as obi chi, the heart of the chi, or the source space of the chi, the source of the universe. So during Ugaka, before Ugaka, there was a separation, right, where where Chuku stays and where everybody else stays become 2 different things. And during Ugaka, the first age, the light beings from Obichi were able to enter the world of the living, which Uwa, aka whatever you want to call it, were able to enter the world of living and go back and forth and so forth as the universe is being built, as the earth is being rebuilt. So in this age, human beings didn't eat, they didn't hunger. Physiologically, we function like light. So if you don't feed light, light doesn't sleep, all that thing. We were light beings, right? It is the next age, which is Ugachi, that we began gaining physical form and we become stuck, for lack of better terms, on Earth, right? So in Ugachi, we gain physical form and we now have to learn how to live as physical beings. That means learning how to prepare and find food, learning how to reconnect to the chi of the universe or our own chi, or rebuilding the spiritual knowledge that was lost when that separation was made. After Ugachi, we became advanced at the understanding of the world, and we entered what is known as Ugangu. Now, during Ugangu, the knowledge of those light beings, the same level of knowledge or connection to the universe that the light beings had, is preserved in individuals known as Umwangu, children of the sun. Ugangu means the age of the sun, right? And these individuals bring about what we now call civilization. They spread across the world, teaching different things. They're revealing things from the universe because of their connection is so strong. But these particular people were able to see into the time we are in now, which is Ugazi, and they were able to say that if we give these people this knowledge, they're going to use it to destroy the world and destroy each other. So a lot of what people knew in Ugangu, they kept to themselves. They died with it because they knew that the coming generation was going to be a different type of human being. Now, the age we're in now, which is the 4th age, is Ugazi, right? If you'll notice, in every age, the connection to the universe becomes further and further and further. And then there's a binary within it where the first age is a strong connection. The second age, the connection is broken and they try to rebuild it. And then it gets strong again, and then it is broken and they try to rebuild it. Well, in Ugazi, we're not trying to rebuild it. The human animal is not trying to rebuild that connection. The human animal is trying to use whatever it has to take advantage of the things around it. Take advantage of people, take advantage of the earth. We are no longer connected to the universe. In fact, we see the universe as a pile of resources that we can use for ourselves. You understand? Whenever things are put in our hands in Ugazi, we use it to destroy other people, right? So when we learn about the atom, we now develop the atom bomb, that type of thing. So
Right.
the knowledge from Ugangu was powerful, but they chose not to hand it to us because they saw what we would become, right? So as Ugazi builds and so forth, the human life expectancy is going to decrease gradually and so forth until we reach a breaking point, and then the cycle continues again. So those are the 4 world ages. They're very similar to the Yuga of the Hindu tradition. Like, even the names have a very strong parallel. So yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so listen, I'm not going to keep you long because we're going to probably do this again, another 30-minute slot before the month over, or probably next month, whenever you want to come back on. You know, you're normally welcome here. They wanted me to ask you about Remy Ilona, but I wanted to leave that conversation for my brother from Igbo Cybershine, because he probably could go into the details more about Remy than you can, because what Remy's trying to do is he recently talked about you know, these folks that got converted and saying that they are officially Igbos now. But when I asked the brother Saturday about Remy, he said Remy's not even known in Igbo land like that. He's not known.
No,
He's not known.
no.
Why is it that he's portrayed as this major guy in Igbo land though?
Because there's the internet and then there's Igbo land, right? So I can speak a little bit, and I don't know him personally, so I don't want to say anything that would be offensive to his character. But I think that a lot of the things he's putting forward are, as you have personally observed, they're pretty damaging to anybody who has a respect for history, right? Or respect for the craft of history and the importance of knowing our actual story, right? I always tell people that history is like a blueprint. You understand? So or like let's use like a house or a car. You buy a car, you want to get the Carfax. You don't want to just hear nice stuff about the car, or you don't want to lie to yourself about the car because you might pull off in the lot and the bottom of the car just drops out. But if you check the Carfax, it's there. Oh, that, by the way, this might happen. So when you distort history and you try to add your own thing, you actually do something very dangerous. And it's what a lot of African people, diaspora and non-diaspora, are dealing with today. So the thing is, Remy is not considered a major scholar in any regard in Igbo culture or in Igbo land and so forth. Remy is primarily popular in the diaspora because I think he has like a big Facebook group, right? And he wrote a book and so forth, but he would not be considered a major scholar in Igbo land, that type of thing. The thing that is interesting, or I mean, it's hard to rectify, but those who are most knowledgeable about Igbo culture are not internet savvy, right? And they don't care to be either. These are elders, these are people who live the tradition and so forth. They're not trying to come argue on Facebook and Clubhouse and all that stuff about so on and so forth. So this is not their thing. You understand? Someone like myself, someone like Onyemobi, we try to bridge the gap between those two worlds by doing actual scholarship, that type of thing. But yeah, Remy's popularity is primarily through, I want to say, the popularity of his Facebook groups. And then as of recent, the Igbo Jewish thing has become very popular, right? And so as that tide increases, this tide increases with it and so forth. But that's what that is. I think Remy's proof that we were Hebrews, in a conversation I had with him a while back, was that he looked at his DNA and he saw that there was
0.02% or 0.002%, right? Yeah, Middle Eastern.
Right. And then I looked there, and I think that one of them was also 2% or 3%, maybe even 6% Kenya, like Kenyan area. Right. I was like, okay, that's funny. Why are you from Israel, not from Kenya? You know? No. And I got blocked from the from the group after that.
He blocked me on his timeline. I don't know how. Me and him, he's on my timeline right now. I don't know how that happened. If you unblock me or whatever, but yeah, he blocked me. He blocked me and a brother named Rawbon because we went on his timeline and tore him up. She's like, oh, there's no such thing as a secret society, no Ekpe society. That's a lie.
See, yeah. So what ends up happening is, in order to make the Hebrew culture and the Igbo culture the same thing, you can't change the Hebrew culture because in the end of the day, it's not yours. It's not your culture. You can't say, oh, the Hebrews had Ekpe as well. You can't say that, right? But you can turn around to yours and start stripping it of its actual elements, so long as they don't match that Hebrew mold that you're trying to correlate and match.
Is one of the main problems in this conversation about the Hebrew and the Igbo is that you have people in the Igbo culture who are actually initiates in the system, and you have people who are talking about it who are not initiates.
Okay, I know what you're saying. Yes.
Right. So it's somebody who has adopted the system and gone through the system step by step, and is now an initiate and can teach the system. And then this is why I don't talk about it that much, because I just go to the basics. This is why I'm inviting you on, the other brother on, and the other brother, because I want people to hear Igbo people talk about it. I don't want to talk about it like I'm the Igbo guy to talk about. No, I'm just going by what I've read, and I'm going by what the people from the country say. But then we fall into a trap because they say, well, we have some Igbo people that are saying that they're Jews. But people don't realize that's the minority. There's a little piece of Igbo. They don't realize over 250 tribes in Nigeria alone. And you're talking about a small amount of people claiming that, 30,000, less than that, probably even 6,000 claiming it. Where they're building synagogues for them, teaching them halakha and teaching them Jewish culture. Come on, that's not the majority of the people in Igbo land.
Yeah, no, I said it earlier. The actual people that have the knowledge and are living the tradition don't come online to argue about it. Because if I join a society like Ikwe, for example, what I am taught is not for me to go and start arguing with non-Ikwe people about. I'm not even saying most, all of the Igbo Jewish people are coming from Christianity. They are Christians, right? In Christianity, the main character of the religion is Jewish people or Hebrews or whatever.
Mhm.
So in order to say, I am a good person, I am a great person, you now say, I am a Hebrew. It is common with a lot of places where you see a prevalence of Christianity. You'll now get this sect that says, no, I'm actually a Jew, right? Because I'm sitting here talking about Jews all day, like, shit, well, why don't I just go ahead and be them? That kind of thing. So it's that bibliocentric, ahistoric worldview, right? Now, the very interesting thing is, like I said earlier, the people who are actual people in the tradition, who practice the tradition, know who they are, right? They know who they are. What you typically get are people who are Christian, want to reject Christianity, but they don't know anything else except that Hebrew thing. I'll use an example. If you didn't read a single book in your life, you never traveled, and the only way you know about the United States or the world is through rap music. You understand? Let's say it's through rap music.
Mhm.
You might make the mistake of thinking Compton is bigger or more important in the grand scheme of America than Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Because the word Compton comes up so much in that thing that I used to learn about. I used to learn the world about. Now, if I use that to say that the world started from let's say hip hop, right? The world started from. I'm going to start saying, okay, who am I? Maybe I'm a Compton person. Maybe I'm from Queensbridge. Maybe you know what I
Right.
mean. Maybe I'm
Right.
from the Magnolia
Boogie
Project.
down Bronx, right?
Maybe exactly. Maybe I'm Boogie Down Bronx. You understand? But when you get an actual education, I'm not saying education going to school. That's not always education for people. Education is like an exposure to the world. When you start
Right.
exposing yourself to the world, learning the truth on the ground, that type of thing, you get perspective, right? Oh, this is just one story. This is just one way of communicating a story of many ways of communicating a story, right? So the Israel thing, that whole Israel thing, the significance of Israel in the minds of people who are not exposed to, who do not expose themselves to learning, and especially self-learning, right? People who don't expose that, it's huge. It becomes a big thing. If you zoom out and look at a map, Israel is a very tiny, insignificant sliver, right? A very tiny, insignificant sliver. There are gardening tools in Igbo land that are historically proven as a fact to be older than human life in the continent or outside of Africa. There are gardening tools, like tools that you use to dig up things and plant plants that are older than anything that has ever been found in Israel. But
Mhm.
because a person's worldview is only that Bible, that's the only thing they know, you're still looking at that like this is the end all be all, or this is where history begins and ends and so forth. And that's where the fallacy comes from, even by the people who leave Christianity and want to start being more traditional. They still have that thing. They're still it's a hard wiring where the entire world is that, if we were to take away the Bible thing and say, okay, let's use hip hop, you'd have groups of people walking around saying I'm Magnolia Projects, which
They found I know they found tools, and there's different archaeological sites. It's probably about 12. And
Yes.
in NSUKKA you had different areas, and you had something that they found over 250,000 years old as relating to Homo sapiens living in the region doing different things with tools. So that's what one of the things. I don't know if that's what you're referring to. I know they found skulls. I think 15,000 years ago they found skulls there. They also have iron smelting, which is older than iron smelting ever in Kemet in Egypt.
Yes.
So that's another thing too, that they're trying to say that the people from Egypt came to the people in America. They're now saying that the people from Igbo land is Egyptians. What do you think about that? Because I look at it as the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah. It's, again, the little you know about the world, you're using it to piece together the entire world instead of humbling yourself and going and doing the knowledge, be that through reading, be that through speaking, like you're doing now, speaking to people who are from the culture, whatever it takes, exposing yourself to people, that type of thing. Critical thinking, right? So you're taking the little you know and you're trying to create the entire history of the world from it. The iron smelting sites, and the two things I'm going to ask people to Google if they need understanding of how ridiculous the whole thing is look at the iron smelting sites at Leja,
JJA. Yeah. Yep.
Got it,
Yep.
right?
I did it yesterday.
Yes, this one's gonna be a little harder to spell. So, and then another one called Ugwuele, Ugwuele, right? This Ugwuele, this one I've listed here, is the oldest site of human mass population on Earth. On Earth. As in the what you're gonna find there is a pile of broken spears. And that pile, if you do the carbon dating, if you take the because just whatever, if you take the carbon dating of the furthest, the deepest in the ground, right, of it, you'll find that this particular place was in use or was populated by a lot of people at a time that the human beings, Homo sapiens, had not yet left Africa.
Wow.
Damn. Yes, there's no human presence anywhere. The only other things that are from that same era or from that similar era are the findings, a piece of cloth that was found in Morocco, right? That's the only other thing. And then you get things like the Shango bones and so forth. But I'm saying anything close to Eurasia is that cloth from Morocco, or what is now Morocco, right? So, and it's not just one or two spears, which you typically find. It is a mass of spears. Like if Amazon threw all their boxes out in one place, all the boxes they've ever produced in one place, you're gonna see this pile, this mountain of them. And they kept stacking them there for generations on end. It is significantly older than any idea of Kemet. It is significantly older than any idea of an Israel, right? Significantly. And funny enough, between Leja and Ugwuele, those traditions continue even after both Kemet and Israel, or the proposed Israel, are off the face of the earth. You understand? So to look at that, right, and then turn around and say that I'm from Israel, 60 million right now. People want to say what do they want, but there are about, I think, between 7 to 12, maybe 13 million people in Israel. That is one state in Igbo land, right? There are 60 million Igbo people. So for many of the people in Igbo land to say that we come from this place that can't sustain a population our size, it makes no sense. It would be like you're in New York, I want to say. It would be like you leaving New York and starting a family somewhere, and somehow, some way, in 100 years, the population of your family is several times that the population of everybody else in New York that continued to procreate and breed and so forth, right? So again, if your only exposure to I don't want to even say scholarship, but to knowledge is biblical, you're going to have a hard time making sense of the world. If your only knowledge of the world is Kemetic, you're going to have a very hard time making sense of the world. If your only exposure is Star Wars, you're going to start wondering, okay, this one's a Sith, this one's a Jedi, and you're going to have a hard time making sense of the actual world. It is good to expose yourself to all these things without being submerging yourself into one and saying this is the beginning and ending of all things. Because when you expose yourself to all those different things, you get a holistic view of the whole story. And then saying something like Igbo people come from this place and that place becomes very ridiculous. Because by all accounts, this is one of the origin points of human culture.
What do you think about the whole, by the way, too, when are you going back to Nigeria? Do you have a trip that go there? What do you do?
So everything I'm doing is part of a long-term master plan to completely relocate, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, I'll probably be going back within the next year and a half.
To live or to just visit?
To set things up.
Okay.
Set things up. So I go regularly. I go back and forth fairly regularly, not as regularly as I'd like. And so next year I'll be going back and then trying to set up things so that my family can be comfortable over there.
Okay. What do you think about being an oral culture? Because throughout all of this stuff, you don't have a lot of writings. We do see some drawings in at the NSUKKA site that's similar to the symbols that's used later on. But why you think that they continue to remain as far as an oral culture throughout all the years?
So I think that, Europeans did us a disservice by saying that a lot of cultures were exclusively oral cultures, because they're not, right? There are many methods by which Igbo culture and cultures throughout Africa are preserved, and preserved very intimately, right? I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, and we were able to trace a connection between groups in Angola and the Igbo culture. And the reason we were able to make that connection is because we have the knowledge of how masquerades work, right? I am what's called Owunta. So when I was young, my father did an introduction to me with the Owu Society. It's a masquerade society in my area, similar to Ekpe and so forth, right? Onyemobi, who you're speaking to, is a member of Ekpe and that type of thing. That's
right.
So in doing that, right? In having that knowledge of those systems, and understanding what you're actually looking at, you can then you understand that a lot of those masquerades are historical records, right? They're historical records. That is one of many ways history is preserved in our culture. Now, I'll tell you how it's a historical record. If I go watch the movie Selma, and now Selma has a lot of propaganda and things like that in there that a lot of people would disagree with, and it's okay, this is not accurate, it didn't happen. But I have a general idea that there was a man named Martin Luther King. He went to Birmingham, he did XYZ and so forth, right? And that particular way of preserving culture through enactment, right? And through very ritualized enactment, so that somebody can't come and add their own spin or their own propaganda afterwards, right? Was how a lot of our people preserved their actual history. There's also the preservation, like you said, that's oral as well. You understand? Then there's also preservation by way of things like Insibidi, right? Insibidi is a writing system of the Igbo, Ejagam, Ibibio, that general area that we call Biafra. This is one of the things they use to connect themselves, is that Insibidi writing system, that written language. So some of it is preserved in that way. You understand? But as far as being an oral culture goes, oral is one of the many ways that history is preserved in Africa. And when I do my research, I don't look at just what is written. I also don't look at just what is in the masquerades. I do a accumulation or a collection of all these things.
So you know what? When you come back, we're gonna focus on that, because I find that fascinating. Cool. So let me know when you're free again. A brother is asking, what Angolan tribe were you referring to a while ago by name?
Look at the town of, I think it's Odibo, Odibo. It is in northern Angola. So we are finding some very interesting connections, and the interesting connection we found was, funny enough, through the Ekpe society. A good Onyemobi, the same guy we were talking about.
Which Remy Ilona said it don't exist, by the way. He said that don't exist. He said those secret societies, because we see that in Cuba and in Haiti. I don't know. How did they get there?
Well, he spoke to an Ekpe, again, I'm gonna give you an example how this works. He spoke to an Ekpe chief. This Ekpe chief doesn't go on the internet. He doesn't have time. You understand? He's a high-ranking person in the society.
Right.
This Ekpe chief is a Cameroonian. Today, he's a Cameroonian, right? And he was able to let Onyemobi know that, no, it's not just that that Ekpe is in Cameroon as well, that it originates from a point in the Congo. And that if you trace, there are things that you can trace and you'll know the origin point. I'll show you exactly what I mean with the masquerade thing. So in my area, we have Owu, right? So there's a community that founded that Owu thing first. And then the community where it came to second, and then third, and so on and so forth. So that when it's Owu season, we can't have Owu until the origin point has Owu, then the second has Owu, and then we finally have it. You understand? Wow. So when you look at the masquerade traditions, you can actually see an exact trace of where that thing came. Ekpe is a masquerade society. So you'll see exactly where it came from. And it starts all the way deep in the Congo. Wow. What we call the Bantu cultures. And all of a sudden it just starts firing out, and then reaches Nigeria, right? That type of thing. So that's the scholarship we're doing now. If I wanted to say that Igbos were Jews and that type of thing, I would take this very significant part of human knowledge and shed that away and throw it away, just so we can match a book of fiction, just so we can fit in with the Harry Potter narrative of World War III. Okay, we're Muggles, so Muggles didn't have societies, they didn't have titles, so we're taking all that, that doesn't exist anymore. All of a sudden, we lose all that history and all that knowledge and all of its practical benefits and so forth.
Word. All right, man. Listen, I want to say I thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate you taking out the time out of your busy schedule. And we got to do this again. We could talk about the transmission, and we could get deep into the archaeology, which is a good topic because a lot of people don't know the archaeology. And this guy says he's Igbo, he's a Hebrew Israelite. He's saying there's nothing past 2,300 years ago. I'm like, you never heard of the knot culture? Not even that. I mean, you know, that they have iron smelting that predates iron smelting in Egypt. That alone should tell you this culture. They have agriculture that goes back way back also. 5,000 years, between 5,000 to 9,000 years, depending on who you're talking to. You know, you have different things in the Igbo land. I mean, they found some skeletons of some type of human, not Homo sapien, but you know, another form of human they found in Igbo land. So you have some form of food, or you said the spears and all that stuff over 250,000 years ago. There's a lot of stuff going on in that region. We're not saying it's the same exact people, but there's cultural episodes being carried on over and over right here. Same thing in Cameroon with the documentary First Peoples when they found the A00. So I mean, we gotta start studying our culture and find the richness. I don't know what's going on with all these people making videos, but we need to start letting the people know in the West what the greatness of West Africa, so they don't have to look nowhere else. You ain't gotta go to Egypt. You ain't gotta go to Israel. We are great right where we are, man. That's what it is. But thank you, bro. Trust me. You got to initiate me, man. How I get initiated, man? I got to work on it. Staff it.
Come to the village. We'll give you your title, man.
Man, I gotta come. I gotta come. All right, bro. Peace and love, man. Thank you very much, beloved. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, so we're gonna jump off right now this live, and then I'm gonna do an after show. I'm starting right now. As a matter of fact, let me start it right now while I'm live, so that y'all could just jump on right onto the after live, and we could discuss all of this right now. So peace and love to y'all. We out of here. Thank you for tuning in for day one of the 20 for 20 series, and we coming live right back right now. Jump on so we could talk about everything that happened. Peace and love. Thank you. Peace.